She thought silence was safer than truth. The sky was the color of forgotten promises, gray, endless, and heavy. Claire sat alone in the corner booth of a small-town cafe, her half-empty coffee gone cold hours ago. The clock above the counter ticked past 8. Daniel was supposed to pick her up at 5. 3 hours late. No call, no message, no excuse. She stared at the rain hitting the glass, the tiny rivers it formed running down like the quiet tears she refused to shed. People came and went, couples laughed, friends waved goodbye, and life moved around her. But Claire stayed frozen, like she'd been waiting not just for a car ride home, but for something far deeper, proof that she still mattered to someone. Then, headlights broke through the rain. A car slowed to a stop outside the cafe. For a second, her heart lifted. Maybe Daniel finally remembered her. But when the door opened, it wasn't him. It was Ethan, Daniel's younger brother. Ethan, the man who had always been too quiet, too observant, too careful around her. The one who smiled softly when others didn't notice she'd gone quiet in a room. He looked the same, calm, tall, eyes carrying a mix of kindness and something he never said out loud. He walked toward the cafe door, shook the rain from his jacket, and met her eyes through the window. Something flickered there, hesitation, maybe guilt, or something deeper. He opened the door, the small bell above it chiming softly. "Need a ride?" he asked. His voice was gentle, almost unsure. Claire hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, waiting, forgotten, embarrassed. But the rain was heavier now, and the cafe owner was already wiping tables, glancing at her to leave. She nodded. Thanks. The drive was quiet. Only the soft hum of the engine and the rhythm of rain on the windshield filled the air. Claire kept her eyes on the window, watching the blurry outlines of houses pass by. Ethan finally broke the silence. "You shouldn't have to wait like that," she frowned. "It's fine. Daniel's busy." He gave a dry laugh. "He's always busy, isn't he?" She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The truth was there, sitting between them, heavy and uncomfortable. They passed the old church on Elm Street. The parking lot was empty, the stained glass catching the reflection of passing cars. That's when Ethan spoke again, quieter this time. "Claire, you don't deserve this." She turned to him, startled. "What are you talking about?" He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "You know exactly what I mean. You just don't want to see it." His words landed hard, like stones breaking the surface of still water. Claire looked back out the window, her voice trembling. "Ethan, please. Don't," but he didn't stop. "I've watched you for years. You shrink a little more every time Daniel forgets you, every time he chooses work or friends or anything but you." Her throat tightened. "That's not your business." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But it hurts to watch." The car slowed as they turned onto her street. The rain had turned into a downpour, the wipers moving fast to keep up. Claire's heart was racing, not from fear, but from something she didn't want to admit. When Ethan parked in front of her house, neither of them moved. The porch light was off. Daniel's car wasn't there. Ethan turned toward her, his voice lower now. "You know, Daniel isn't the only one who noticed you stopped smiling." Her breath caught. She couldn't speak. The words sat in the air, warm and dangerous. She opened the door quickly, her hands shaking. "Thank you for the ride," she whispered. Ethan nodded but didn't start the car. He just sat there, eyes following her as she walked toward the door. She fumbled with her keys, aware of his gaze behind her. She could feel it, steady, patient, but filled with something she couldn't name, something that scared her more than loneliness ever did. When she finally stepped inside, the silence of the house swallowed her whole. No lights, no warmth, no voice greeting her. She leaned against the door and closed her eyes. Her chest felt heavy, like the rain outside had seeped into her heart. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Daniel. "Sorry, got caught up at work. Talk tomorrow, just that. No apology. No love." She put the phone down slowly. For the first time in years, she didn't cry. She just stared at the screen, then out the window, where Ethan's car still sat in the rain, headlights dim, unmoving. Minutes passed. Then the lights turned off, and the car drove away. But his words didn't. They stayed, whispering, echoing, twisting in her chest. Daniel isn't the only one who noticed you stopped smiling. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face. His expression when he said it, his quiet eyes full of something unspoken. Was it pity? Concern? Or was it something else? Her thoughts ran wild. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was tired, emotional, reading too much into simple kindness. But deep down she knew. Ethan didn't look at her like a brother-in-law should. He looked at her like someone who had been holding back for far too long. She got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself some water. The digital clock blinked 2:47 a.m. Rain still poured outside, the steady rhythm matching her heartbeat. She stood by the window again, staring into the night. Her reflection stared back, tired, pale, but with eyes that suddenly looked alive again. It had been so long since anyone looked at her that way. So long since someone saw her beyond being Daniel's wife. The thought scared her. But beneath the fear was something she couldn't push away, something dangerous and warm. When the thunder rolled outside, she whispered to herself, almost like a confession. Why did he say that? The answer didn't come, but the silence around her seemed to hum with meaning. By morning, she had convinced herself it meant nothing. She'd pretend it never happened. She'd see Ethan at the next family dinner, and it would be fine. They'd both act normal. She'd forget the way he looked at her. But when she stepped outside to get the mail, Ethan's car passed by again. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. He just looked at her through the window. A quick glance, a quiet acknowledgement, and drove on. Her heart skipped. She wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. He was thinking the same thing she was. Something had shifted, and they could never go back to before. That evening, Daniel called again, this time just to say he'd be gone another night. "Big project," he said, his tone casual. Claire said, "Okay," and hung up before he finished his sentence. She looked around the empty house, the quiet walls echoing with the sound of rain and memory. She sat on the couch and whispered, "Why does it hurt less to be forgotten than to be seen by the wrong person?" But was it wrong? That thought scared her more than anything. When she finally fell asleep on the couch, she dreamed of the drive again. Ethan's voice, the rain, his eyes. And the moment he said her name like it meant something. She woke with tears on her cheeks, heart pounding. The clock read 6:12 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the world outside still looked washed out, fragile. Her phone buzzed again. A new message, from an unknown number. "I shouldn't have said what I did, but I can't watch you disappear anymore." Her breath hitched. It was Ethan. She stared at the message, unable to move. Every word felt like it had weight, pulling her toward something she wasn't ready to face. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Should she reply? Should she pretend she never saw it? She typed one word, "Why?" but didn't send it. Because deep down, she already knew why. And that was the most dangerous truth of all. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The house felt smaller now, like it was closing in on her. She could almost hear Ethan's voice again, low and certain. "You shouldn't have to wait for someone who forgets you exist." For the first time, she didn't disagree. She walked to the window. The street was empty except for a single car parked under a tree, the same car from last night. Ethan's. He hadn't left. He was still there, watching, waiting. And in that moment, Claire realized that silence was no longer safe. It was a choice, and it was breaking her. Her heart raced as she whispered to herself, "If silence is the only thing keeping peace, what happens when it finally breaks?" She turned away from the window, the question echoing through the empty house. Outside, the engine started. The car slowly pulled away. But as the taillights disappeared into the fog, Claire's phone lit up again, this time with a single new message. "We need to talk." Her hands trembled as she read it, and before she could think, before she could breathe, she whispered, "Oh God, what did I just start?" The screen fades to black. The rain begins again. The story has only just begun. What happens when the person you avoid starts seeing the real you? The morning light broke through the blinds, soft but cold, brushing against Claire's tired eyes. She hadn't slept. Ethan's late-night message kept flashing in her mind. "I shouldn't have said what I did, but I can't watch you disappear anymore." She wanted to delete it, pretend it never existed, but she couldn't. The words were carved somewhere deeper than her phone screen, into the part of her heart she'd kept locked away. Daniel's voice pulled her back. "Did you make coffee?" He was standing by the door, dressed sharp, phone in hand, tie slightly crooked. The same routine, same words, same detachment. Claire nodded. "On the counter." He took a sip without looking at her. "Big meeting today. I might be late again." "Of course," she said softly. He didn't notice the bitterness behind her politeness. He never did. As he left, she stood at the window, watching his car fade into the distance. The silence he left behind felt heavier than before. She pressed her fingers to her temple and sighed. There was a time when mornings felt alive, when Daniel used to kiss her forehead before leaving, when laughter filled the kitchen. Now there was only the sound of the refrigerator humming. By noon, the house felt too quiet. She decided to take a walk to clear her mind. The streets were wet from last night's rain, the air still cool and damp. She wrapped her scarf around her neck and tried not to think. But memory has its own way of following you, especially when someone's voice echoes in it. She passed the little bookstore on Maple Avenue, the one she and Daniel used to visit years ago. The sight of it made her stop for a second. Then she saw a familiar car parked a few feet away. Ethan's truck. Her heart skipped. Before she could turn around, the door opened and Ethan stepped out, holding 2 takeaway coffees. Their eyes met. Neither spoke for a moment. Then he smiled, that quiet smile that made her stomach twist in ways she didn't want to admit. "Hey," he said, walking closer. "Didn't expect to see you here." She managed a weak smile. "I could say the same." He hesitated, then offered her one of the coffees. "You still like hazelnut, right?" Her breath caught. "You remember that?" He shrugged. "Some things just stick." They walked together down the sidewalk. It felt awkward at first, like stepping into a space they weren't supposed to share. But soon the conversation softened. They talked about the rain, the town, the bookstore, safe topics, harmless words, yet beneath it all was a quiet tension neither could ignore. As they reached the corner, she said, "You shouldn't have sent that message last night." Ethan looked down, his voice low. "I know. I crossed a line." "Yes," she said, more to convince herself than him. "You did." He nodded slowly. "But I meant it." Her heart fluttered, confusion flooding her chest. "Why would you say something like that?" "Daniel's your brother." Ethan stopped walking. "Because you're not invisible, Claire. You think no one sees what's happening, but I do. I've seen it for years." She turned away, her throat tight. "You shouldn't say things like that. It's not right." "Maybe not," he said, stepping closer. "But neither is pretending everything's fine when it's breaking you inside." His words hit harder than she expected. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "You don't know what I feel." He looked at her then. Really looked. "I know you're lonely," she froze. The sound of cars passing, the wind brushing through trees, it all faded for a moment. Ethan's eyes softened. "And I hate that he doesn't see what he has." Her heart raced. She wanted to walk away, but her legs wouldn't move. For a split second, she saw something in him. A mirror of all the feelings she tried to bury. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. She answered quickly, voice steady. "Hey, everything okay?" Daniel asked. His tone was sharp, like he was checking for something he already suspected. "Yes, just out for a walk." A pause. "With Ethan?" Her pulse spiked. "He just ran into me. That's all." Daniel was silent for a moment. Then, "I'll be home for dinner." "Don't make plans." Click. The line went dead. Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket, avoiding Ethan's eyes. "He sounded tense," Ethan said carefully. "He's always tense," she muttered, "especially when it comes to control." They walked the rest of the way in silence. When they reached her house, Ethan handed her the coffee cup again. "You should rest. You look tired." She forced a smile. "I'm fine." He smiled faintly. "You always say that when you're not." That sentence hit her like déjà vu. It was the same thing he'd said years ago, back when Daniel first started drifting away. She didn't reply. She just nodded and turned toward the house. But as she opened the door, she glanced back. Ethan was still standing there, watching her. The rain started again, light but steady. He didn't move until she stepped inside. That evening, she tried to distract herself with dinner prep, but her thoughts wouldn't stop circling. Ethan's words replayed in her mind, soft, dangerous, true. Daniel came home late, tie loosened, face drawn with stress. "Smells good," he said absently, dropping his keys on the counter. She nodded. "You said you'd be home earlier." "Yeah, well, traffic." It wasn't traffic. She knew that tone, the one that came after lies told too often to sound believable anymore. They ate in silence. Forks clinked against plates. The clock ticked. Then Daniel finally spoke. "I saw Ethan today." Her heart skipped. "Oh? He didn't mention you." "Because there's nothing to mention," she said too quickly. He studied her, eyes narrow. "You seem defensive." "I'm not." "Claire," he said, voice sharper now, "I don't want you getting dragged into his mess." "His mess?" she asked, confused. Daniel leaned back. "Ethan's always been different, emotional. He doesn't know where lines are." She wanted to argue, to defend Ethan, but she stayed silent. Any defense would sound like guilt. Later, when Daniel went upstairs, she stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the reflection in the dark window. Her face looked tired, older somehow, but behind her reflection, she could almost see Ethan's eyes again. Concerned, honest, real. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel. "Ethan, I didn't mean to make things harder for you, but I need you to know, you're not alone." She stared at the message for a long time, the words sinking deep into her chest. No one had said that to her in years. "You're not alone." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to reply, but fear held her back. She set the phone down and walked upstairs. Daniel was already in bed, half asleep. She lay down beside him, her back turned, eyes open in the dark. She could hear the faint rain tapping against the window again. Her heart beat faster with every drop, because now she wasn't sure what scared her more, Ethan's feelings or the part of her that wanted to feel them too. The days that followed blurred together. Daniel stayed busy. Claire pretended, and Ethan kept his distance until Saturday. She was coming out of the grocery store when she saw him again, standing by his truck, waiting. He waved lightly. "Need help with those?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They loaded the bags together in silence. When they finished, Ethan leaned against the car, looking at her with quiet concern. "Has Daniel been home much?" She shook her head. "Barely." He looked away, clenching his jaw. "He doesn't know what he's losing." "Ethan," she whispered, "please don't." He met her eyes. "You keep telling me not to, but you never tell me I'm wrong." Her breath caught. "Because this is wrong," she said weakly. He smiled sadly. "Then tell me you don't feel it." Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them said everything. Then a car horn blared nearby, snapping her back to reality. A silver sedan turned the corner. Daniel's car. Her heart nearly stopped. "He's here." Ethan stepped back immediately, his face tightening. "Claire, just go," she whispered urgently. Daniel pulled up beside them, rolling down his window. His tone was sharp. "What's going on here?" "Ethan was just helping with groceries," Claire said quickly. Daniel's eyes darted between them, suspicion simmering beneath his calm smile. "I see. Well, thanks for the help, brother. I can take it from here." Ethan nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Of course." But as he turned to leave, his eyes met Claire's one last time, a silent look full of everything they couldn't say. Daniel watched him drive off before turning to her. "You should be more careful about appearances, Claire." She frowned. "Appearances?" He leaned closer, his voice low. "People talk. Don't give them a reason to." She wanted to shout that maybe he should stop giving her reasons to feel forgotten, but she didn't. She just nodded and carried the bags inside. That night, Daniel was quiet at dinner again. Not angry, not loud, just cold, detached. Claire couldn't eat. The air in the house felt suffocating. She excused herself early and went upstairs. When she closed the door behind her, her phone vibrated again. One new message. "Ethan, he doesn't deserve your silence. You deserve someone who listens." She sat on the edge of the bed, tears welling in her eyes. Her heart ached with confusion. Love shouldn't feel like betrayal, but maybe being loved finally was the real betrayal. Her fingers hovered over the phone. This time she replied, "Claire, please don't text me again." She pressed send. Her hands trembled. For a moment she felt relief, like she had done the right thing. But as the seconds passed, the relief turned into emptiness. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence was deafening, then the phone buzzed again. One last message. "Ethan, you can tell me to stop, but you can't make me forget." Her breath hitched. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She turned off the lamp, closed her eyes, but her heart refused to be quiet. Downstairs, Daniel's voice echoed faintly on the phone, laughing with someone. The sound of it made her chest tighten. She pulled the blanket close, whispering to herself, "What if the person who sees you isn't the one you're supposed to love?" Outside, thunder rolled again, and in that moment, Claire knew. Something inside her life had cracked open, and it would never close the same way again. The screen fades to black. The storm begins again. The truth is no longer waiting. It's coming. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's a war no one else can hear. The night had a strange stillness to it, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Claire sat by the window, staring at the streetlights outside. The glow painted long shadows across her face, and for a moment, she wondered when she had stopped recognizing her own reflection in the glass. Ethan's words replayed in her mind like an echo she couldn't turn off. "You can tell me to stop, but you can't make me forget." She had told him to stay away, but her heart betrayed her every time his name appeared in her thoughts. Daniel was downstairs, pacing while talking on the phone again. His voice was low, serious, but not the kind of serious that belonged to work. There was laughter, too, a woman's laugh on the other end. Claire couldn't hear the words, but she could hear the tone. That tone told stories she didn't want to imagine. She stood quietly at the top of the stairs, half hidden by the shadows. Daniel's back was turned, his voice soft, playful. Then he said, "You worry too much. She doesn't even notice." The words hit her like cold water. He wasn't talking about business. He was talking about her. Her breath caught, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The world seemed to spin for a second, then go completely still. When Daniel finally ended the call, she slipped back into the bedroom before he could see her. Her heart was pounding so loudly it hurt. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, numb. She didn't need to ask who the woman was. She didn't need proof. The silence between her and Daniel had been the proof all along. When he came upstairs later, she pretended to be asleep. He smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his. He climbed into bed without saying a word, turned his back, and fell asleep within minutes. She lay beside him, eyes open, heart breaking quietly in the dark. By morning, her decision was made. She couldn't live in that silence anymore. She needed air, space, something to remind her she was still alive. She left early, not telling Daniel where she was going. The streets were calm, washed clean by the night's rain. She drove aimlessly until she found herself at the edge of town, at the small lakeside park she hadn't visited in years. The one Daniel had taken her to on their first date. The air smelled of pine and water. She sat on a bench watching the ripples move across the lake. Her hands were trembling, but her mind was strangely clear. She finally allowed herself to cry, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet sobs of someone who had carried too much for too long. Then, out of nowhere, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Claire?" She turned. Ethan stood a few steps away, holding a grocery bag in one hand. He looked surprised, almost worried. "What are you doing here?" She tried to wipe her tears quickly. "Just needed some air." He placed the bag on the ground and sat beside her. "You've been crying." She laughed weakly. "You always notice things I wish people wouldn't." "That's because other people aren't looking," he said softly. They sat there for a moment, neither speaking. The sound of water lapping against the shore filled the space between them. Then Claire finally whispered, "He's seeing someone else." Ethan froze. His hands tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Did he tell you?" She shook her head. "He didn't have to. I heard him." Ethan looked at her, the pain in his eyes as real as hers. "You don't deserve that." "I know," she said quietly. "But knowing doesn't make it hurt less." He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but he held back. His hands clenched on his knees. "You can leave, you know," he said finally. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "Leaving means admitting it's really over." "Sometimes things end long before you walk away," he said. Her eyes met his. For a second, the world went still. There was something in his gaze, understanding, compassion, love, that felt more like home than the house she'd left behind. A tear slipped down her cheek, and this time, Ethan didn't hold back. He reached over gently, wiping it away with his thumb. The touch was soft, brief, but enough to send a tremor through her entire body. She looked away, flustered. "You shouldn't do that," he exhaled. "Then stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're trying not to fall." Her breath caught. "Ethan?" He stood suddenly, running a hand through his hair. "I can't do this. He's my brother. This isn't fair to anyone." She rose too, her voice trembling. "You think I don't know that? You think I want this?" They stared at each other, caught between guilt and longing. Finally, Ethan whispered, "Then why are we here?" Claire didn't have an answer. She looked at the lake, her reflection rippling with every gust of wind. "Because I don't feel invisible when I'm with you," she said. That broke him. The control he'd been holding onto cracked. He took a step closer, voice low and aching. "You were never invisible to me." Before she could say another word, her phone rang. She froze. Daniel's name lit up the screen. Her heart thudded in her chest. She answered, voice unsteady. "Hello? Where are you?" Daniel's tone was sharp, suspicious. "Just out for a walk. With Ethan?" Her throat went dry. "No. Don't lie to me, Claire." She looked up at Ethan, who was staring at her, silent but tense. "I'm not lying," she whispered into the phone. Daniel's voice dropped lower. "Come home, now." The line went dead. Claire stood still for a long moment, phone shaking in her hand. Then she looked at Ethan. "He knows." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then let him." She shook her head. "You don't understand. This will destroy everything." He stepped closer, his voice firm. "Maybe what's already broken needs to fall apart completely." Her chest ached. "Ethan, please, don't make this harder." "I'm not trying to make it harder," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make it honest." Her eyes filled again. "You can't fix my marriage." He nodded slowly. "I know, but maybe I can help you fix yourself." She turned away, tears streaming down her face. "I need to go." He reached for her hand but stopped himself just before touching her. "Claire, don't," she said, voice shaking. "If you say anything else, I won't be able to forget it." And then she walked away, fast, before he could answer. The drive home was a blur. The sky had turned dark again, thunder rolling in the distance. When she pulled into the driveway, Daniel was waiting on the porch. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. "Where were you?" he asked. "I told you, out." "With him?" She hesitated. "No," he laughed bitterly. "You're a terrible liar, Claire." She clenched her jaw. "At least I'm not the only one lying." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," she said quickly. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think I don't see it? The way he looks at you? The way you act around him?" She swallowed hard. "Ethan's done nothing wrong." "That's where you're wrong," Daniel said coldly. "He's always wanted what's mine." Her eyes widened. "You're drunk." "Maybe," he said, smirking. "But I'm not blind." He turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind him. Claire stood there, frozen in the rain, heart pounding. Every word felt like poison. Daniel wasn't wrong. There was something between her and Ethan, something unspoken, unstoppable. She walked inside, dripping wet. Daniel was sitting on the couch now, scrolling through his phone. Without looking up, he said, "Don't make me regret trusting you." Her voice trembled. "Do you even remember what trust feels like?" He glanced at her briefly, then back at his phone. "Maybe you should ask Ethan that." That night, Claire couldn't breathe. The walls of the house felt closer, heavier. She wanted to scream, to leave, to run. But she couldn't. So she sat in the dark living room, hugging her knees, watching the clock tick past midnight. Then, a sound. A soft knock on the front door. Her heart stopped. She stood, walked slowly, afraid of what she already knew. When she opened the door, Ethan was standing there, soaked from the rain, his face pale and desperate. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Then why are you?" "Because I can't let him hurt you anymore." Her breath caught. "Ethan, please!" He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, his voice trembling. "I'm not leaving until I know you're safe." She looked over her shoulder, terrified Daniel might come downstairs. "You have to go," he shook his head. "Not this time." Lightning flashed, illuminating both their faces, his filled with determination, hers with fear and longing. For a second, time stood still. The world outside raged, but between them, there was only silence, thick, dangerous, and alive. Then, from upstairs, a door creaked open. Daniel's voice, groggy but sharp. "Claire? Who's at the door?" Her heart dropped. Ethan's eyes widened. She turned toward him, whispering urgently, "Go, please." But Daniel's footsteps were already coming down the stairs. Ethan hesitated, torn between leaving and staying, and just before the next flash of lightning, Claire whispered, trembling, "If you stay, everything changes." He looked at her, his jaw set, and whispered back, "Maybe that's what's supposed to happen." The sound of Daniel's footsteps grew louder. The door was still open. The rain kept falling, and in that charged silence, between truth and discovery, the story balanced on the edge of a choice that could ruin everything. The screen fades to black. Thunder roars in the distance. The truth is about to break loose. Love doesn't always arrive the way it should. Sometimes it walks in when everything else is falling apart. The air was thick that night, charged with tension and rain. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, her heart beat louder than the storm outside. Ethan was right there, soaked, trembling, eyes full of things she wasn't ready to hear. And from the stairs above came Daniel's voice, heavy and suspicious. "Claire?" he called, footsteps echoing down the hall. She turned quickly, whispering to Ethan, "You have to go, please." But Ethan didn't move. "I'm not leaving you like this," he said firmly, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his gaze narrowing the moment he saw his brother standing there. "What's going on?" His tone was calm, but his eyes told a different story, sharp, accusing, dangerous. Ethan took a slow step back. "I came to check on her." "The storm?" Daniel cut him off. "You live across town. Don't pretend this is about the weather." The room went silent except for the rain pounding against the windows. Claire tried to speak, but her throat felt locked. Daniel turned to her. "You let him in?" She swallowed hard. He was just, "Don't lie to me," Daniel snapped. Ethan clenched his fists. "Don't talk to her like that." The tension cracked like lightning between them. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Of course. My perfect little brother. The hero again." Claire stepped between them. "Stop, please." But Daniel's anger had already found a target. "You think I don't see it? The way you look at her?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "If you treated her like she mattered, maybe no one else would have to." That hit like a spark in dry air. Daniel took a step forward, fists tightening. For a second, Claire thought he might do something he'd regret. She moved fast, standing between them. "Enough, both of you!" Her voice broke, shaking with exhaustion and fear. The room fell silent. Only the thunder outside dared to speak. Daniel's eyes darted between them, and then quietly he said, "You know what hurts the most. I trusted both of you." Ethan's expression softened. "Daniel, I never—" But Daniel turned away. "Save it." He grabbed his jacket and walked out into the rain, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. For a long moment, no one spoke. Claire just stood there, breathing hard, her hands shaking. Ethan finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She turned to him, tears filling her eyes. "You shouldn't have come." "I couldn't stay away," he said quietly. "Not knowing he talks to you like that." Her voice cracked. "You made everything worse." He nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I'd rather tell the truth and lose everything than keep pretending." She looked at him, torn between anger and something deeper, something she didn't dare name. "You need to go, Ethan." He took a small step toward her. "If I leave now, he'll twist this. He'll make it your fault." "I'll deal with it," she said softly. "Just go." Ethan hesitated, searching her face for any sign she wanted him to stay. But all he saw was pain. He nodded finally, his voice breaking. "If you ever need me, I know," she whispered. He stepped outside into the rain, closing the door gently behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable. Claire pressed her forehead against the door, tears falling freely now. She felt like she'd lost both of them in one night. She didn't sleep. Every shadow felt heavier, every sound sharper. When dawn finally came, Daniel still hadn't returned. By mid-morning, she found him sitting on the porch, soaked, exhausted, eyes red from more than just rain. He didn't look at her when she sat beside him. The air between them was cold, brittle. "Daniel," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He let out a hollow laugh. "About what?" "How my wife and my brother found comfort in each other. It's not what you think." "It never is," he said bitterly. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You stopped seeing me a long time ago." He finally turned his head, his expression unreadable. "You think that excuses what happened?" "No," she said softly. "But maybe it explains it." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel stood. "I need time. Alone." He walked inside, packed a small bag, and left without another word. The sound of the door closing felt final, like the end of something that had already died long ago. Days passed. The silence in the house became unbearable. Claire tried to distract herself with chores, work, anything to fill the empty space. But Ethan's words wouldn't leave her. "You deserve someone who listens." She wanted to hate him for saying it. But the truth was, he did listen. He always had. One evening, a knock came at the door. She froze, thinking it might be Daniel. But when she opened it, Ethan stood there again, hesitant, cautious. "I shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Then why are you?" He took a deep breath. "Because I can't pretend anymore." She shook her head. "Ethan, please. Not this again." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just needed to see you. To know you're okay." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in," he entered quietly, glancing around. The house felt empty, hollow. "He left?" he asked. She nodded. "He needed space." Ethan sighed. "I'm sorry." "Stop saying that," she said sharply. "You didn't do this alone." He met her eyes. "Maybe not, but I made you feel something you shouldn't have to feel." Her voice softened. You made me feel alive again. That silence, the one that always hung between them, returned, thick and heavy. But this time it didn't feel wrong. It felt real. Ethan took a cautious step closer. Claire. She looked up, tears forming again. Don't, he stopped, his voice trembling. If I say I love you, will that ruin what's left? Her breath hitched. The words she had been afraid of hearing were finally out. Ethan, she whispered. Please don't make me choose between guilt and truth. He nodded slowly. Then I'll choose for you. Before she could react, he took her hands gently, his eyes steady on hers. I love you, not because you're his wife, not because you're broken, but because you see the world like it still matters. Tears streamed down her face. You shouldn't have said that. I know, he said softly. But I'd regret it more if I didn't. She pulled her hands free, backing away. You need to go before I forget what's right. He hesitated, pain flickering in his eyes, then nodded. If that's what you want. It's what I have to want, she said weakly. He turned toward the door, his voice barely a whisper. Goodbye, Claire. When he left, the house felt even emptier than before. Claire sat on the couch, staring at the rain against the window. Every drop felt like a memory she couldn't wash away. Hours passed. The phone rang once. It was Daniel. She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, when does doing the right thing stop feeling like punishment? The following morning, she went for a walk near the lake again. The same bench, the same wind, but this time, there was no Ethan. She sat there, thinking about the years she had given to silence, to patience, to waiting for love that never looked back. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life that wasn't built around someone else's absence. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Coming home tonight. We need to talk. Her heart skipped. She typed back. Okay. That evening, she cleaned the house, made dinner, lit a candle. The motions felt mechanical, like a script she had performed 1,000 times before. When Daniel arrived, he stood at the doorway, looking unsure. Can I come in? She nodded. Of course, they sat at the table. The silence was thick again. Finally, he said, I'm not proud of what I've done. Neither am I, she replied softly. He took a deep breath. Do you love him? The question landed like a thunderclap. Her lips trembled. I don't know. But you care for him, he said quietly. She nodded. I do. He looked down at his hands, his voice cracking. Then maybe I've already lost you. She reached across the table, her hand brushing his. You lost me when you stopped seeing me. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Can we fix it? I don't know, she whispered. I think some things don't go back to what they were. Daniel nodded, defeated. I'll stay at my brother's for a while. The words hit her like a wave. Ethan's house. The irony cut deep, but she didn't stop him. After he left, Claire walked to the window again. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. She thought about Ethan, his eyes, his voice, his confession. About Daniel, his regret, his silence. And about herself, caught between two versions of love, neither of which felt whole. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message. He's here. He knows everything. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Please don't come. Ethan, her hands trembled. She read the message again, disbelief sinking in. The screen flickered with another text, this time from Daniel. You were right. Some things can't be fixed. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her keys and ran out the door. The rain had started again, harder this time, washing everything in silver. As she drove through the storm, her mind raced with fear and guilt. The windshield blurred with rain, but she didn't slow down. She didn't know what she would find at Ethan's house. She only knew one thing. Whatever waited there would change everything forever. The headlights disappear into the storm. The screen fades to black. A final clap of thunder echoes, and the truth remains unseen.